how long this took to execute, two separate. So this is really just a time. So you can see this one took about 3 seconds to execute. So here, the number, I'm just setting a variable called toDial, which is really just the extension, because I have a pattern match here. On the second line here, I'm setting the result to a variable called res, and that's just the URL that I was showing on the other screen there. Then I use the array function, which, because my format is going to come back separated into different fields with a comma, then I just know that that's the format that's always going to come back, and I just assign it to the array, which will break each of those fields into a separate variable that I can use in my dial plan. And then my dial plan basically just goes through, determines if a rate was found, which just means did I get any information back. And then if I did, make sure that I set the values to all the variables, check to make sure I actually got a rate back, which would allow me to do some information checking. And then I just dial out and go ahead, because I'm not going to do any other checks beyond that for this. And then when the call hangs up, all I'm doing is setting into the within the H extension, this is executed when a call is hung up. So I'm setting this here, the CDR with the BillSec, is a dial plan function that's basically setting how much time was the call actually set up. So once the call had been answered, how much time had accumulated. I set that to minutes, which is the number of seconds divided by 60, although I think that seems backwards. And then I basically do some checking here, multiply the rate by the number of minutes I used, and then basically just output that says this is how much the call cost. So when I go actually through it, I see down here the cost of this call, which lasted only a few seconds, is fractions of a penny. Questions? So the next thing that I think is pretty cool here is the Jabber integration. And what this allows you to do is, first with Asterisk 1.4, and still within 1.6, we can actually send messages to an instant messaging client. And with a branch that is currently pretty much ready for testing, and I've even marked it as ready for review, which means it's getting ready to get merged into Asterisk at some point, is the Jabber receive, which allows Asterisk to actually take a response back from the message you sent and then perform some routing based on that information or anything else you want. So again, we have to use the EPEL repository, install some dependencies, and then we can build Asterisk with this information. So I found it actually pretty easy to get connected to my Jabber connection, which is just using my Google Talk connection. So automatically register, yes, which means register on Asterisk Startup. I'm going to act as a client. The host is talk.google.com with my username and password. I actually created a separate user as Asterisk so that my Asterisk box can send messages as itself as opposed to someone else. And then this is just how to connect and what my default status is and what the default status message is. So with the Jabber Send application, we can create a simple pop-up for incoming calls. So here, basically when the call came in, it basically set the caller ID and created a message and sent it to my, my regular Gmail account. And so when it came in, it just did this Jabber Send before it did the dial. And then as my phone's ringing, I'm getting this message that says incoming call from, well, my cell phone. So with the receive application, now I can actually respond back and do something. So what I could do is say someone who didn't hear very well, they could actually get a message when they called in the system. They could actually get a visual IVR so that when they wanted to call someone, they could actually press a number on their instant messaging and then route the call appropriately. So maybe you have a separate, like a TTY interface or something like that you wanted to route to when someone was getting that prompt. So you could give them that option, which would then route to a device or however that might work. So again, we just use the So basically this is what I'm sending with the Jabber send application. When the call comes in, I'm going to send this menu, which, so when a call comes to me, I'm going to say, press 1 to send the call to voicemail, or press 2 to send to myself. So maybe I'm not at home, but maybe I have an instant messaging client on my phone. I get that, I can either say, oh, I'm busy, so I press 1. I don't even have to answer a phone or anything. Just automatically send the call off to my voicemail. Or if I want to forward to my cell, because that's the device I'm actually holding in my hand, then I can do that as well. So call comes in. Oh, right, okay. So what I'm doing here is, because the trick with the Jabber receive function is that it actually waits for input. So the dial plan execution actually stops while it's waiting for input, and that's by default 20 seconds, but I could set it to anything I want. So I'm going to use a little trick here where I'm going to call 2 local channels. One is basically just a simple dial plan that is going to ring my desk phone, and while simultaneously running a separate section of dial plan, which is actually going to wait for input from a caller. This is basically it going through. I wonder if I actually show that. Yeah, so here's how I made it work. So here's the dial, and it's calling 2 separate sections of dial plan. So local, the start extension at the dial phone context, which is actually going to call my phone. And I'm also going to call the start at receive Jabber section of dial plan, which is actually going to wait for input from Jabber. So here's the 2 sections. Very simple here. When it's going to simultaneously run both of these sections of code at the same time, right? So this one is basically running and dialing my desk phone. And while that's happening, this section here is going to send my menu to my client on my laptop or phone or whatever, and say, this person's calling, what do you want to do with the call? And this could just be ignored if you want to answer it. Once you've answered your phone, your desk phone, then this actually just stops executing, because that's where the call is connected to. And so what will happen is, like in the previous slide here, I'm going to call both of these sections of dial plan for 30 seconds. And if neither of them answer the call at all, then it's just going to roll over to my regular voicemail and say I'm unavailable, just as if I didn't even get the call. So then this is basically doing the check here. What did I actually enter? I entered a 1 or I entered a 2. And will then either go to voicemail. So here it will actually answer the call, and then my desk phone will stop ringing. Same thing here. I actually should have an answer in here, so my desk phone will stop ringing, but in this case it could actually ring both at the same time. So I'm getting pretty much close to the end of my presentation here. I'm actually pretty good time. And so this was for the PHP script. I'm not really a PHP scripter, so I went and found this function here, and the multi-dimensional array read-in. Got some wholesale rates from Illimitel, which gave me some data to play with. And that's pretty much it. So I can take any questions or anything. How confused is everyone right now? It's the end of the day. We've all been watching presentations, and I went through some crazy stuff pretty fast.
Yeah, I don't get having to dial plan much, but that was straightforward. So that was thorough enough.
Cool. So yeah, I will remind everyone that we have the TOG meeting at 5 in 714A. So yeah.
Well, really great presentation. I just wanted, on the calendar app, are there any API calls that you can interface some other calendar that you might have to it?
I guess you mean things that aren't supported natively?
Right.
I'm not aware of that.
I have a calendar app my favorite calendar app, whatever.
Oh, I see.
And I want to interface that.
Well, use the CalDAV, right?
Yeah.
It has to be able to export the calendar.
Right.
So it's going to most likely do that via either iCal or CalDAV, since those are the 2 most common formats.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's you
totally
just pull it in.
Yeah, so you would basically say you're using that.
This is not a calendar server.
No, I
This is a
understand.
client that goes to an existing
Absolutely
server.
understand
Right.
that.
So you could, I would assume you could export your .ical file to a website, and then that would be the URL you would pop in
Right.
and then you would then import that, which would then be imported